on episode number 3 of Runs on the Board podcast, and our first ever guest, Conor McInerney. Welcome. Good morning.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's a very cold morning here in Adelaide, so it's good to get up and get into a little bit of fun.
Have a chat, mate. Have a chat. And you've just come back from overseas, mate. I caught you. I was texting you around some World Cup games, etc. What have you been up to travelling around?
Yeah, so a little quick trip to Europe. Well, not too quick, 3.5 weeks. So went over there with my partner. We had a wedding at the end of our trip, so did a little bit of travel beforehand around the UK and then Europe. So finished off with a nice wedding. So it was great fun. It's pretty grim being back, really. It's freezing here, so it was nice and warm over there.
There you go. There you go. And mate, diving into your career and whatnot, playing for South Australia, I'm curious around looking back at your career. What are the feelings? What are the highlights? And how would you describe your career as a first-class cricketer?
How would I describe it? Probably looking back, I was a bit of a battler in the end. I tried my hardest and tried to get everything out of myself. I had a couple of stints there across 5 or 6 years. But the last couple of years have been probably my favourite memories. Getting the chance to get back into the team and then contribute to a our first Shield final win in 29 years, 2 seasons ago. So that was absolutely amazing. And even last year, winning it back to back, didn't necessarily play, but felt like I was still part of the squad and made some contributions early in the season. Amazing memories. After obviously growing up here in South Australia and never obviously seen a couple of Shield finals in my time, but to actually play in one and go and win was probably the best cricket memory of all time.
Absolutely. And looking back at the double now, what do you think South Australia has done right? And what do you think was some of the magic source behind the scenes that enabled the 2 in a row and looking good for maybe even 3 in a row?
Well, first of all, personnel. The players and the squad, an amazing bunch of players. But also like the coaching staff. Rhino came in, and I'm not sure if he made many changes because I hadn't really been around the group, but he came in straight away and demanded respect and put in a really good program with these assistant coaches, and all the staff did a really good job of implementing that. Did some work on culture, and really got the guys to buy in. So I think the talent was there. It just probably needed a few little fine-tuned things, and it worked. Probably get lucky with a few things along the way, with the results-wise, or a wicket here, or certain runs here and there. But at the end of the day, we worked our asses off and got the rewards in the end.
Was there a goal of this year we're going to win it, or was the outcome something which was like, no, let's put in trust the process and see what happens?
Well, it was a bit of both. I think process was a huge one. Rhino brought that in, and that was something that I'd probably never fully focused on. So that was awesome, like individually and as a team. But the goal was definitely to win both comps that first year. I remember the end of pre-season, he took us all out to the middle, gave us a big speech, and basically laid out the law and what he wanted for us from the season. And I think it really inspired. It definitely inspired me. Watching Rhino when I was growing up playing Test cricket, and bowling with one leg and giving absolutely everything he had out of his body. And he's a really inspiring player, and it was the same as a coach. So yeah, definitely it was the goal, and it happened.
And mate, when you're out in the middle and you've got some decent quicks at you, or some spinners, etc., who do you think, looking back at your career, was the most challenging, but also the most, that you just loved the battle playing against and coming on, right, this is game on?
Well, probably probably one of the biggest challenges was probably as a quick like Michael Nessa. Like he's been around for so long. He's once again got that reputation. He's such a great player, and he was just always at you. Not necessarily the quickest bowler, but highly skillful and always making you make a decision, which was really hard. And had my number a few times. Well, I guess he had a few number. He had a number of a lot of guys, but always found that a tough challenge. And then probably if you think about spin, like I only faced Nathan Lyon once, but when I faced him, it was next level. Like once again, he just didn't really give you a break. It's always tough for a left-hander facing an off spinner, but he had all these variations, and you're trying to look out for him. And to be honest, they didn't really look any different out of the hand. It looked the same, and one would spin or one would go straight on, and you had to be really sharp on that. So no wonder he's played so many tests and been one of Australia's best ever players. So.
And mate, you made 100, going through the motions of that whole innings of getting there, and maybe some nerves, or maybe some looking at the scoreboard. Do you want to talk about that and how you went about that innings, and then obviously the looking back now and the rewards that you got from that innings?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you talk about the scoreboard. That day at Karen Rolton, the scoreboard wasn't working. So I basically batted that whole innings without a scoreboard, and I definitely think it helped me, to be honest. I didn't actually think about it. I remember even getting to 50, I thought I was in the 30s, and the guy started clapping. So, I mean, getting close to 100, I think one of the Queensland players yelled something out, it's like 97 or 98, and I was like, oh, really? Like, I didn't really believe him. I just thought they were trying to put me off. And so I just kept batting, and, 2 balls later, I hit a 4 and it was 100. So, I think that definitely helped me. Normally I like seeing the scoreboard just to see the total scheme score and see what I'm on, and, partnerships and things like that. But I think in that case, it really helped me. But yeah, the feeling was amazing. I hadn't had the best season. I'd struggled a little bit, and especially coming up to that game. It was getting towards the end of the season. But so the game before, I'd got a duck and won. And then during the week, Rhino actually came up to me, took me for a lap, and said, "Look, I want you to relax. Like, we're gonna back you. We're gonna pick you for this next game and for the Shield final." And not that I was necessarily thinking about selection, but it probably just gave me a little weight off my shoulders, and to show that he was backing me, the selectors, and Buddha, the captain, were backing me, and just let me relax and enjoy batting. And I batted well and got 100. So the wicket was pretty flat that day, and it was hot, so the bowlers got tired. But yeah, it was awesome. It was an awesome feeling, and one I wish I'd done a few more times, to be honest.
What was the key in your head to batting time?
Well, I think process. Like, talked about that a bit earlier, and that's something that we really focused on with Stephen Stubbings, the batting coach. Just own your process. So rather than think about the result, think about how you want to do it and what you want to do, and keep doing it every ball. The runs will look after themselves. So it's something I did really well that day, and I've done it a few times throughout that season as well. So, I think just taking the result out of your head and doing the same thing every ball, that's going to, set you up to score runs.
And mate, we've got the upcoming domestic season. The draws out there now. There's on the recent episode of Runs of the Ball, we talked about the Saka going for the 3-peat. You'll believe that they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like added some nice players to the squad. I think there's going to be opportunities for those guys as well. I think there's an Aussie A tour coming up at the start of the season, so some of these new guys are going to have to step up and play straight away. But I think that's great as well. I definitely know that they'd be in meetings at the moment talking about preparing everyone, and not just if you got to be ready, even if you haven't played before. So they'll be all over it, and the usual performers will be there as well. Levo and Buddha and Benny Benenti. So they'll make sure everything's running smoothly.
And mate, any particular players that you might want to keep an eye on this season that may have been emerging, or someone that you're like, oh, that's right, they're actually pretty hard to bat against or whatnot?
I think it could be a big year. If they sticking there, so it could be a big year for Jake Fraser McGurk. I think he's gotten a bit older now. He's probably, I think I saw in an interview Rhino made a while ago, or maybe the back end of the season. Like last season was probably the most runs he's actually ever made in the season. He didn't necessarily play every game for South Australia, but he had a good season for his club, West Torrens. Batted some time in some innings, and actually had quite a few innings where he faced over 100 balls. So he's still only 23 or something. He's got plenty of years left, and he's got a first class 100. He's played for Australia, so he's got all that experience under his belt. I know the talent he's got, it's going to click, and he could become a really dangerous player, especially in red ball cricket.
And mate, a little bit of a question to finish. Non-South Australian, who's the first Sheffield Shield player that comes to mind?
Oh, maybe Callum Vidler. He's obviously faced him a couple of years ago now, when that Shield final and the round before, and it was a bowler that the type of bowler I'd never really faced. Like, he's not very tall. He's just a skinny kid, and kind of jogs in and snaps at the crease and bowls, almost 150. So it was a bit hard to get used to at the start. But if he can get fit and his body harden up and get his back right, he's going to be a really dangerous player.
And then one Sheffield Shield or domestic one-day cricketer from your youth that you remember watching on the TV?
Maybe Dan Harris. He always pops into my mind. He's an opener playing for South Australia, so it was always cool. And he was the captain of my club, Woodville, when I was younger, so used to get to see him at training a bit. It was always cool to watch him play in the Ford Ranger Cup and things like that. So
there we go. We'll find some footage of Dan and give him a tag, mate. That's awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Conor, thanks for the quick chat today, mate. Great to get you involved in Next 11, and feel free to dial in and do some content and have some fun when you get a chance, mate. And I appreciate the update.
No worries, Chris. Thanks for having me.